Welcome back to the Hawkszone Rundown. We are live, holiday Monday here, and we got a special announcement show. A couple of real cool announcements coming out. We got Mookie Alexander joining us as well to talk about some cool new stuff that's going to be happening here with the channel. So we're going to get into all that, and we're going to touch on the John Schneider news conference, whatever you want to call it. He was on 710 a couple days back, and we're going to get into that interview too, and we're going to kind of dive into that and pick that apart and talk about John's comments. And then another new segment that we're going to talk about, it's coming up, and we're going to do a bit of a mock draft as well. So that is going to happen. And guys, flood your questions and comments in as well, because we are going to get into all of that as well. We want to hear everything you guys got to say. Let us know what you think about John Schneider's interview. Want to hear what you thought. Kind of the first time we've heard from John addressing a few things. Obviously, a lot of things that are on people's minds. So flood the comments. Super chats will be a priority. And guys, if you've been watching the channel, if you haven't subbed yet, go down, hit the sub button for us. Like the videos, share the videos. All that helps out on the channel. So we're not going to waste any more time. Mookie Alexander joining us on the other side.
So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about me!
Yeah, let's go. It's go time, baby.
Here comes Gino. Steps up, takes that shot to the end zone. It is Metcalf. 20.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You about to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Off me.
Nobody in the world can do it.
Are you kidding me? Trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Jackson Smith is Jigba. The circus music rolls in. Throws forward. Oh my goodness, he caught it.
This is the Hawkszone Rundown with your hosts, Ryan and Bryce.
So rundown, we have Mookie Alexander joining us again, usually coming on every second week on Pulse of the Hawks, but this is kind of a special episode for us. We got some announcements to make. Mookie, appreciate you coming on, man. You know what? Floor is yours. I'm going to hand it over to you. A couple things happening with our channel, but specifically with you as well. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah. Happy Monday, everybody. Normally it's every other Monday, but I'm here on the intermediate Monday because we got a special announcement to make. No, we're not always doing this show while it's still bright outside. And I'm almost not used to it. I hardly do any podcasts in the daytime, whether it's this one or otherwise. So it's just a bizarro experience, but I asked for it. So, that aside, one of the announcements pertaining to the Hawkszone Rundown podcast is that Ryan and Bryce will now be a part of the Field Gulls team. In fact, they've got their accounts already. So all that's going to be squared away over the next couple of weeks, or actually next couple of days, actually. So that means that you are going to see the Hawkszone Rundown podcast on Field Gulls, not just when I'm on it, because normally I just write articles about the Pulse of the Hawks segment, but every Pulse of the Hawks, other shows like post-game reaction, all of the episodes that you've come to see on YouTube and through audio streams, they're going to have their own write-ups on Field Gulls as well. And maybe Bryce and Ryan, or Bryce and or Ryan will also have some additional stuff for Field Gulls too. But it was great to join the show several months back. And I think it's only fair that after the partnership that we have created, that we bring the Hawkszone Rundown onto the Field Gulls platform. I do want to note, though, that we're not changing the name or anything. You already got that merch, so I don't want to go Field Gulls presents the Hawkszone Rundown podcast or anything. It's still going to be Hawkszone Rundown, but I'm so stoked, freaking jacked and freaking pumped up, to quote Pete Carroll, to bring you both on board moving forward. This is going to be a great partnership.
Yeah, we honestly on both ends here, man. Like it's we're honored to be a part of the Field Gulls. We're excited to get going with it as well. We're pumped as well. We're excited about the opportunity here. So we're jacked to get things going as well. Bryce.
Yeah, honestly, like it kind of came together organically, which was great. And I couldn't be more excited to join, Mookie, yourself, and some of the other great guys that you have and people over at Field Gulls, and join that community and bring what we've started over here at Hawkszone over there, and all the people that we've got in our chat that have supported us and help us achieve our goals to come on over there. I'm sure they already read stuff that is there. So now they'll be able to go to one place to get all the information that they want.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that's the thing, right? So, guys, it's working both ways here, right? So head over to Field Gulls. That's the thing too. It's gonna bring that video content to Field Gulls as well, which we're excited about to be the ones to do it, because everybody that's flooding the comments and right now, it's it sounds cliche, but it's with your support that's able to kind of get us to this point and open up some of these doors, and we're uber excited. So yeah, Mookie, appreciate it again, man. We're pumped, and yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be great. I mean, we're in the dead period of the offseason. We're going to make it fun during the next couple of weeks before free agency starts. But I guess we got the combine, the next time Pulse of the Hawks happens. But when we have the big tentpole events like free agency and NFL draft, and even the schedule release, I guess, is pretty much a tentpole event these days. You can be sure to find Ryan and Bryce, and sometimes me if I'm available that day, on Field Gulls itself. So we're not just reaching out to those of you who are watching on the YouTube live streams, but also with cultivating the sense of community within Field Gulls, because we had a podcast for several years, whether it was Brendan Schultz handling it, or then in the one season with Dan Viennes and Dana O'Gorman. So we've had that void that we haven't been able to fill for a while. But I figured you two are the ideal fit right now. And it's just been really fun to do the show. And it's also fun to see all the activity and the increased activity, the increased subscriber count over the last couple of months to kind of build this thing from the ground up all the way to beyond 1,000 subscribers and hopefully beyond. So I think this is going to be beneficial for Field Gulls and Hawkszone Rundown alike.
100%. And, the big thing I want to kind of push out there too is it's really thanks to all of our supporters, like everyone that's come in and subscribed and watched the show and been a part of these live chats and, been on the Pulse of the Hawks ones, and just, it's really you guys and how much you've supported me and Ryan in this past year and a bit that we've been doing this. Like, we haven't been at this for an extremely long time, but you guys have really made this enjoyable for us. And we can't wait to go on this journey with you guys over to Field Gulls and, to really create some really special things coming up here in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. So yeah, look, guys, look out for that. Make sure you're going to Field Gulls as well, because not only are we going to be up there, but there's always awesome content daily. Seahawks, obviously. So you want to get over there and just dive into that too. So that's the exciting part about this. So yeah, and then also, guys, a couple other things. We started a membership program. So yeah, basically just gives you guys a few extra perks with the channel. A lot of the content that you're seeing right now, that's not going to change. Pulse of the Hawks, our post games, all that's going to full access to people that have subbed to the channel. But there is a couple of levels to memberships that we're just going to run through right away. And then we're going to get into some of the football talk. Obviously, we're going to get to the Schneider stuff. But Bryce, if you just want to pull up one of the pages there for the levels. So if you guys check it out, and this is all going to be on the channel that you can go down, you can click and you see all that. So yeah, so there's just two programs. So the first one, it's $1.99 a month. You get priority reply to comments. The member shout outs, there's going to be some member only shorts up there. So any of the short videos, some of those unique ones will be for members only. And there'll be loyalty pages, badges, all those cool things. So yeah, so it just gives people that have been with the channel just a few extra perks. So there's some cool stuff. And then there's also another level we got too. So you get all the perks of the first one. And then there will be some member only live streams that throughout the year, the off season, there'll be some cool stuff. So that'll be for members only. But like I said, guys, everybody that's up to the channel, it's not like things are going to change as far as, we're still going to be creating a lot of this content and you'll be seeing. There'll just be some extra stuff. There will be some member only live streams throughout the year. So that gives you access to that. Early access to some new videos. It's not going to be all the videos, but there will be some early access to some really good content that's going to be, again, out throughout the year. Cool guests that are coming on the show. You guys will get first crack at it before it goes live to the public. And then the discount on merch. There'll be some good deals on there as well. So some real good discounts. So you'll get a code, and you can get in there for some merch discounts. So that is kind of the run through. Again, everything's going to be on the page. Click the link. All of this will be on there for you guys to have a look at. So those are a couple cool things we got going on. And then Bryce, you want to touch on it is mock draft time. A lot of guys doing mocks. Bryce created specifically a mock draft show. Bryce, you want to run to that real quick?
Yeah. So basically, the way it's going to work, everyone, is we're going to be doing mock draft Mondays going forward. So actually, every week, I should say, we'll be doing a mock draft Monday. Sometimes they'll be live. Days that, Mondays that falls on our Pulse of the Hawks show with Mookie will be a pre-recorded, and they'll come out on the Tuesday after. But we will be doing a mock draft Monday all the way leading up to the draft. I want to get, our viewers involved, especially on the live ones. We'll do some that are kind of different. We won't just follow the same old bread and butter of ideally what we'd like the Hawks to do. There'll be some ones where we go in different directions and see what happens. So it'll kind of play off that and play off what our listeners want to see happen in the draft. So, it's going to be an exciting time. Looking forward to it. Gives us a way to connect over the draft going forward over these next couple of months.
Yeah, good stuff. So, guys, look out for that. And we're going to get into a mock too. We're going to do a quick mock later on the show. So, with all that out of the way, guys, that was a lot of stuff to cover. Well, we covered it. Like I said, the big announcement is the Field Gulls one, though, guys. Like I said, I can't reiterate it enough. We are pumped. We're honored, and we look forward to get it going. And honestly, Mookie, just continue rolling on with the Pulse of the Hawks segment, man. We're having fun with that too. It's been a great segment. It gives the viewers a lot of your insights. It's been awesome stuff, man. So yeah, just looking forward to continuing and keep things rolling. So, and this offseason, man, let's get into it, because talking about this offseason, combine stuff coming up, free agencies right around the corner. John Schneider, finally made an appearance there. Goes on the radio station, the John Schneider Show. I guess it's year 3 they're doing the Schneider Show, right? Everybody's got their own take. A lot of people really commented, and there was some softball questions going on there, but I want to hear your guys' takeaway, because for me, I mean, the biggest thing everybody really wanted to hear was, what are you going to do with the offensive line, right? And from listening to John, he's not giving away a lot of things, but when he said, the philosophy really wasn't going to change just as a whole, even when they asked him, because you're a solo guy now, but to me, it didn't sound like, and I want to hear your guys' opinion, it didn't sound like he was really raring to make a huge splash day one on an offensive lineman. That was kind of a big takeaway from my end. Now, that doesn't mean they don't go get a center, but just kind of hearing the vibe from John, that was sort of my takeaways, that he's gonna go to the draft and go get some guys. It just sounded like to me he feels like coaching could play a bigger role here with this line developing. We all don't think Trey Smith is going to be here, but like we talked about, the centers, some middle round guys. What were your guys' takeaway from the Schneider thing?
Go ahead, Mookie.
Okay, with Schneider, it seems to me the free agency line there about we're not the idea they can just spend money at some position and fix it. I mean, we've been burned by that before, so we're not going to make those same mistakes. I got to admit, the history of the Seahawks burning money on the offensive line through big free agency money is not very deep, at least under John Schneider, because I can only think of Robert Gallery and Luke Jokel. And Gallery was a bad signing because he was a bad tackle and an only moderately better guard, and he wasn't but 1 year into a 3-year deal, and then they got rid of him. And then the Jokel signing was just all-time bad. That was one of the worst off seasons of Schneider's tenure. But I get the idea of what he's trying to say as far as draft and develop. We've been bringing this up on Hawks, Pulse of the Hawks a million times, that Seattle's had a hard time doing both. And he even cited the Philadelphia Eagles and Jeff Stoutland, their offensive line coach, and their ability to draft, identify, then draft, then develop. And that's how you get non-first round picks like Jordan Mailata and Cam Jurgens. And I know there's somebody else I'm forgetting there. And of course, Jason Kelce, now retired. as non-first round picks who ended up becoming high-level offensive linemen. And in Jurgen's case, he's probably going to be a highly paid one too. Seattle has had a hard time identifying the linemen that they want. Drafting them has also been a mixed bag at best. And then forget about development, because they've very rarely been able to keep the guys that have been a net positive for them. And then they've also let guys go like Mark Lewinsky, who've been able to be at least decent starters on other teams. So the line about we know what our deficiencies are. Well, no kidding. I mean, that's been true for a long time. It's just a matter of actually fixing it. And there wasn't anything earth-shattering that Schneider really said as it pertains to the offensive line. How you develop, how you attack in free agency versus the draft. It's just a matter of show me something. Like, show me something different. And I don't expect Seattle to throw a lot of money into investing in the offensive line in free agency. That is fine. I don't need to sign the highest paid center in the league. I just need reasonable costs. Don't be reckless, but be smart and targeted with who you want and who fits your system, instead of this kind of incompatibility we've often seen over the years with the offensive linemen they've signed and drafted and their offensive line coaches and sometimes their offensive coordinators.
Yeah, it was interesting when I was listening to John. There were a couple things that stood out. I think one thing where he said their process isn't necessarily going to change, but one thing he did say was an issue and needs to get better is the evaluation process. That was one thing that really stood out to me, was him finally admitting that they had messed up in their evaluation and missed on multiple guys. And so I get where his thought process is. Like, the draft is still an area you want to go to. You want to get guys and you want to develop them. You can't just buy your O-line in free agency, which is fair. But you can also be this guy that constantly bargain hunts at the bottom of the O-line in free agency and expect to get good results out of it. There's a reason guys are at the bottom. Now, I think they are going to go, I think in wave 1 or wave 2, they're going to get a center. I think that's a key thing. You heard Kubiak say it in his press conference, and I think John's aware of it. I think things are going to be a little bit different with Mike McDonald than they were with Pete Carroll. I think Mike's going to be a little bit more forceful on what he wants and how he's going to get those things done. You look at what happened with the 2 linebackers this year that John provided him to what we ended the season with, were guys that Mike McDonald wanted versus guys maybe he was given because he was busy building his staff at the time. So I think Mike's going to be a little bit more forceful on what he wants, what he needs. I want to see them, and Rob Staten brought it up on one of his shows, actually. I thought it was an interesting kind of way of going about things. Now that you potentially have a established offensive line coach, someone that knows the NFL, knows how it works. He's been at it for over 30 years coaching at this level. To me, it's very interesting to look at potential reclamation projects where high draft pick guys like a Mekhi Becton, who didn't work as a tackle, but you slide him into guard where maybe he should have started his career and you see the benefits of it. So like, I look at someone like Tevin Jenkins from the Bears. He's got a good zone blocking grade on PFF. Take that for what you want. But he doesn't really work as a tackle. If you slide him into guard, he might be a guy that actually pans out and you get plus side upside from. And go with a Drew Dalman at center and get a guard like that, someone that you're taking. And then still, again, address it in the first 2 rounds of this NFL draft where you can go and get Donovan Jackson, because everything I'm reading and everything I'm hearing from people that I talk to and stuff is they think the substantial part of guards or tackle guard conversion guys are going to be in rounds 2 and 3. Like, you're going to be able to get good players that are startable players in that range. Go get an impact defensive player at pick 18, whether that's a Shamar Stewart if he's somehow there, a Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, one of these guys that's there that can come in and play on your defensive line and be a game wrecker. That's kind of where you want to potentially go with pick 18 if one of those guys falls, instead of just, I get everyone wants us to address the offensive line. I understand that that's the biggest area of concern, but you can do it in multiple ways and still get a good result of it. It's not going to necessarily be a snap our fingers, we have a top 5 O-line or top 10 O-line or top 12. But if we can get into being a mid offensive line with good coaching, and I think another thing is Christian Haynes. I know a lot of people have written him off because of last year. The scheme didn't fit Christian Haynes at all in what he's good at. He was one of the best zone blocking guards coming into the draft, his draft year. Him in this scheme with Kubiak, if that's what they lean into, which I think they're going to, I think you might see a better version of Christian Haynes than we saw last year.
Well, we hardly saw
Hey,
Christian
Mookie,
Haynes. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to ask you, like, with all that being said, do you think based on those comments that he's still gonna, like Bryce said, like we're still gonna go after a center because of, say, Kubiak's approach? Because I agree. I think there's gonna be some guys developing. But again, do you want to just rely on that and say, look, if you do get if one area they do get a little reckless with the spending, I'd be fine with it if it was the O-line. You know what I mean? If they just threw money at it and it didn't work, at least he did a 180. Like he switched it up and didn't, and then we can, at least then he can say, hey, look, guys, I tried it. I tried it on my face. And because, you know, listen to his interview, it was almost like he was a little gun shy still with things that have happened in the past. And you mentioned it's not like they're that deep as far as the O-line, as far as spending money. You can bring up the Malik McDowell thing on the defensive line, but it's like, you know, as far as, I mean, that was a draft, but just stuff that it's like he's gun shy in certain situations now. So I would be okay if he got reckless, if he spent on the O-line. Other places, no. Other places, I want, you know, do it calculated. But I feel like and I think fans and everybody are I think a lot of people are on board with that. Just throw money at somebody, and if it works, it works. I mean, we've talked on the show the last month about guys that we think they should target, but what are your thoughts on that? Would you be okay if they were a little reckless there, opposed to not spending and doing the similar things, a bargain basement, the draft? And so what's your take on that? And do you think he will 180 it then?
Well, there is nuance to this. So Seattle has their tackles. I mean, if Abe Lucas has a normal, healthy offseason for the first time since he was a rookie, you have your tackles. Now, whether they're here in 2026 is a completely different conversation. We don't have 6 hours to discuss that. But the interior offensive line is where the Seahawks have struggled. And yeah, I wish they could have kept Damian Lewis, but hindsight's 2020, maybe not at those prices. But whatever the case, you look at their interior O-line situation, you might need a new center, or at least somebody to be alongside Oluwatimi in competition, who isn't a bargain basement sign, you know, bottom of the barrel signing like Nick Harris, who not straight up wasn't good enough to even be on the roster through the second preseason game. And that's part of why they ended up picking Connor Williams. Left guard, Tomlinson, the only reason that you bring him back is just he has past familiarity with John Benton, and he pretty much never misses any snaps. Right guard is a big question mark because Bradford should be a bubble player with the way these first couple of seasons have gone. But you don't want to totally give up on him. Then you've got Christian Haynes. There has been talk, I guess, about moving Haynes to center or maybe putting him on the left guard side. And then there's Satoa Lomea. So you have some guys there, and then you even got Sundell at center. Whether he might fit Benton's scheme is a totally different story. But you have some guys that you've drafted or signed recently that are worth keeping around in camp on the possibility that they can be developed by Benton. But if the Seahawks are of the mind or are of the belief that they can be actual playoff contenders this season, not 3-4 year, this is a clear rebuilding project, we haven't got our quarterback, we haven't got this, we haven't got that, then they're going to have to look at free agency and not break the bank, but at least dip into your checking account just a little bit. So you don't have to bleed into your savings. Just dip into your checking account just a bit. If it's not Drew Dahlman, maybe it's Ryan Kelly for a year. Maybe it's Josh Myers, who's much younger. Kelly being 32 is just, kind of my pause there. If they're going to sign veteran offensive linemen, I don't want them to be deep into their 30s and not have any part of a long-term future with Seattle. So I can see Seattle doing something like that, and I would appreciate it. Justin, and I've said this a million times, the Nwosu signing in free agency and the Julian Love signing in free agency, or you want to go way back with Cliff Averill on the defensive side of the ball, those were good free agent signings that were not terribly expensive, but they weren't dirt cheap either. And all of them ended up getting contract extensions after their first season. Now, Nwosu we'll get to at another time. Bad luck more than anything, but Love has been worth the money, and Cliff was sure as hell worth the money. We have never really seen that sort of move, that sort of business move applied to the offensive line appropriately. And I can see Schneider's side about free agency and the offensive line in general, because let's face it, the best offensive lines are typically the ones where it's majority your draft picks that have been developed. So let's use a Seahawks example. Let's use one from 20 years ago, which is so long ago that the three of us were probably all still in grade school at the time. But Walter Jones, drafted. Steve Hutchinson, drafted. Robbie Tobeck, free agent signing. Now, maybe Drew Dolman gets to be this generation's Tobeck for all we know, but you get the idea. Chris Gray wasn't drafted. He was a free agent signing, but he wasn't like one of the top guards in the league when he came over to Seattle. Sean Locklear, drafted. So you had that core for several years. You had continuity on that offensive line from the moment that Locklear was part of the picture. But still, you had those other four there for several seasons, and they had that chemistry together in ways that Seattle is constantly changing the cast members in and out of the offensive line. And usually it's been justified. So if we want to use a more modern example, then you look at the Philadelphia Eagles again. Mailata, drafted. Dickerson, drafted. Juergens, drafted. Lane Johnson, drafted. Only Becton hasn't been drafted by the Eagles, and he was just a one-year flyer signing, and maybe he'll hit the free agent market. Maybe Philadelphia will re-sign him. Kansas City, I know this year's offensive line isn't the best example, but look what happened after they lost the first Super Bowl to Tampa Bay. They got Trey Smith, they got Creed Humphrey, and they made the splash signing of adding in Joe Thuney, and I think they eventually traded for Orlando Brown. They've done a bit of both. They've signed Jawan Taylor, hasn't really worked out. They've got Orlando Brown, but the big thing with Kansas City is they had guys who were drafted and developed accordingly. The best we could hope for Seattle is that on the tackle side, they might have at least one of those two available in the long term. But the interior O-line has just been a mess. And I feel like they should still look at drafting interior offensive linemen, but not necessarily at 18. So that's a position, that part of the offensive line is where you can generally get your better guys in the second round or later. I mean, Kelsey was a 6th-round pick or something like that. Dahlman was definitely not a day one pick I can recall from Atlanta. So over the years, it's been 2nd round or later. Creed Humphrey, famously a 2nd-round pick, and we know who Seattle chose at the time. So that offensive line is not as coveted in a top 5, top 10 setting, but there are ways that you can rebuild the interior offensive line without just completely going bankrupt, as it were.
No, exactly, Mookie. And that's kind of how I feel about it too. Like, you look at now that we've got John Benton in here as a, offensive line coach. It sounds like Rick Dennison's going to be here as a offensive senior analyst who, again, was an O-line kind of running back coach with Gary Kubiak when he was in Houston and has been around for a while. So I think you're going to see a level, maybe more so than Seattle's ever seen, is a true level of understanding of what offensive linemen need to be able to do and how they can play well and be successful at this level than we've maybe seen with an Andy Dickerson, Mike Solari, Scott Huff. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out for Seattle this time in the draft and what guys they actually end up looking at and going after. And, maybe our perception of how Seattle evaluates line is going to change, because that's the one thing that stuck is John alluded for the first time, instead of kind of like skating around that question or not really addressing, he honestly came out and said, we haven't been good in our evaluations, which is the first time he's openly kind of admitted we failed, because the scouting department's his thing, right? Like, that's where he grew up in Green Bay. So like that whole department and everything is really his baby. And he finally has openly admitted they failed at it, and they failed at it for numerous years. It's, been a development issue, whether it's been a coaching issue, whatever it's been, they haven't got it right. And I think that's where, for John, I think we're going to see a decent O-line signing, not a Lincoln Tomlinson, but actually someone that's decent, because I think he knows that he's a bit on the hot seat. Like it's simmering, but if he fails and has an offseason like he did last year, like we've all kind of talked about, he's going to be firmly in the boiling water next offseason. I don't think he wants to be there. And, with Clint Kubiak and this new offensive staff coming in, like, you have to give them the ability to succeed. And Not to say that Ryan Grubb would have succeeded necessarily, but I think some of Ryan Grubb's shortcomings in this season were due to a lack of addressing of that area the proper way and evaluating what you needed to do. So it'll be interesting to see. But anything else, Mookie, for you that stand out or stood out from John Schneider's show besides offensive line?
No, not particularly. I mean, just the noting that this line, I would say it changes every year by position except for the offensive line. I guess just the guys you can get through the draft versus free agency. And he mentioned that the offensive line is kind of just the standout because there's always the supply and demand issue of there are not enough great offensive linemen around. So great offensive linemen generally don't hit the open market and generally are not traded at the primes of their respective careers. So the Laramie Tunzels and the Trent Williams type trades, those don't happen a lot on the offensive line for a reason. We've seen big trades for wide receivers. We've seen trades for cornerbacks and edge rushers, but not as much as like superstar caliber offensive linemen. It just doesn't happen very often. So I can see his point of view on that front, but yeah, Seattle's need to change their focus and their process with the offensive line really has to happen because it's not just the offensive line. To me, there are two things for Schneider. One, finding a quarterback of the future. No, that does not mean Gino's got to get cut tomorrow. It means Gino won't be your quarterback 5 years from now, almost certainly, because that's just how sports biology works. He's going to be 40 years old by then. He is not Tom Brady. So there's that side, and then there's the offensive line. You screw up the offensive line, you're probably going to have a hard time having your quarterback of the future succeed, and you're going to have a hard time with Gino succeeding as it is right now. And I mean, it's not like he hasn't had to deal with this before. In 2010, him and Pete come in, they do the extreme makeover of the roster. What do? First draft pick, Russell Okung. They kept Unger, so they inherited him. But quarterback, their fix was Charlie Whitehurst. It was like a really expensive kind of stupid flyer, but it got Seattle Golden State, so it wasn't all that bad. And then 2011, first round pick, James Carpenter. Reach? Absolutely. Thought process? Sensible. I mean, John Moffitt didn't work out in the third round. They tried to build the offensive line early, the first couple of seasons. And sure enough, they had the most expensive O-line in the league in 2013 through their draft picks. But Kung had the before the modern CBA kicked in, he had a much more expensive contract than he would have right now. But they had attempts to rebuild that offensive line. Then they got their quarterback. The worst case scenario for Schneider is if he has neither. If he doesn't build this offensive line successfully and they don't find their quarterback of the future either this year or next year, one probably has to happen over the other, such that if the offensive line is still terrible, that probably means Gino ain't here next year. And now you got to fix two things. If the offensive line is decent, whatever happens with Gino, at least you've got that going for you heading into next season. So like when they drafted Russ, yeah, there were some offensive line issues because that's just the curse of Steve Hutchinson leaving. But you had Okung, you had Unger. Unger was the Pro Bowler that year. Don't forget. Back on the Pro Bowl kind of meant something. So Wilson got to inherit a reasonably decent offensive line. I would like to see Seattle have that for their next quarterback, as opposed to the common thing we see throughout the NFL, which is we've drafted this quarterback. Oh shit, we don't have an offensive line. Let's all fix that all at once. It's just too difficult to do in one shot.
Yeah, and a lot of teams do it. You know, a lot of teams try to do that, right? And it blows up in your face, like Bryce Young and Carolina. Before they started, then they go sign a Damon Lewis, right? The other takeaway for me is just when they asked, what kind of process is it with John working alongside the coaches, as far as hey, if do you need a running back? What kind of guy do you need? So it feels like he's kind of saying, yeah, you know what? Just because Pete's gone, I'm working alongside Mike, and it's this process together that, I'm relying on their expertise. He mentioned the X's and O's. He's like, yeah, that's when I that's when I exit stage left. So he's not trying to do stuff that he knows is out of his realm. He's relying on certain guys, and that's why he's put these guys in place. And I think he trusts Mike McDonald a lot. And now with Clint Kubiak. So I think he has guys in place now that he really trusts moving forward that can, make decisions together, right? And I'm relying on Mike because you're an expert in this area, and Clinton, you're an expert in this area, and I do what I do. So I think for me, I think he really thinks highly of Mike, not just as his head coach, but a guy that can help them build this team together, right? So I think that's the other thing I took away from it more than anything. I know the O line is going to be the low hanging fruit and the thing that everyone wants to talk about, but I think building this team, I really felt like, one of the other takeaways, really the only other takeaway was that he says, listen, I can build this with these guys. I feel confident, and I'm going to rely on them for a lot of moves.
Yeah, and it's important to note that if you've read the John Boyle breakdown, the behind the scenes at the Senior Bowl, I mean, that this is like the first proper offseason, really, where McDonald and Schneider is a true partnership. So I would anticipate McDonald having much more of an input, not exclusively on defense, but just the roster in general. He doesn't have the same front office powers that Pete had, but it's the famous Bill Parcells quote, right? If you want me to make the meal, you should at least let me get some of the groceries. Well, he doesn't get to have full Safeway privileges, but he at least gets to shop around with John.
Right.
So that's one of my takeaways just from the Senior Bowl article, and also what Schneider said on 710 with Bob and Dave. So that is kind of the lifeline for Schneider, is that we get to see now that this control variable of what happens when McDonald comes in. And yes, Will, in the comments, I had to unblur my camera because I'm not used to this, doing this in the daytime. I normally have the light on up there, but I had to unblur, so I couldn't do the Cheech and Chong filter going. There is no trip going on.
I like that reference.
The one thing I'll say, though, that also stood out to me a little bit in this, and it's away from the offensive line, but kind of to what you're talking about there, Mookie, with the true offseason, is how much John really said Mike was the driving force behind the OC hire. And he kind of almost like they'd meet, and then he'd really step back, and how much he was still in awe of how Mike McDonald's brain works, the process he goes through, how they came to this, how it all worked through and everything. And like, I think Bob said on the show, Bob Stelton, he was like, hey, well, people were worried you guys were going to miss out on who you wanted. He's like, that was never a concern. Like, Mike knew who he wanted after like that round of interviews. It was just going back and him going through his process to get to the next one. So that was one thing I found interesting, where I wonder if that wasn't the case last year with Grubb, where it's more kind of like, hey, it was a collaborated effort more than Mike being like, this is what I need my OC to do. And now he's got that, I think, in Clint Kubiak. And I don't think Clint Kubiak is a 1-year hire. I think Clint Kubiak's going to be here for a couple of years at least. And it was also interesting to know, like, they kept Pete's and some of these other guys around on this staff. So, it was definitely an interesting kind of thing from John to kind of openly admit that, this was really more a Mike hire than it was a team effort. It was kind of Mike driving the force behind it. So, overall, I thought it was a good first show for John. It'll be interesting when the DK and Gino questions start coming up.
Well, it's mid-February, so I can't imagine like he's going to have an answer now. The only thing that was notable is when Mike said last Monday, we're working through things with Tyler Lockett. So that's you can read between the lines here, given how correct he was with so many other comments. But the Gino and DK contracts, that's going to be a storyline, and Gino especially, because we've got like a few weeks before that bonus is due.
Yeah, that's going to be, get your popcorn ready for that, man, because that's the thing, right? That's why we love the offseason. But let's get over to the next segment, guys. Little preview of these mock draft Mondays, because we're going to actually get into our own mock draft today. It is Monday. Usually mock draft Mondays are going to be a full show. So Bryce is really running that ship, and that's going to be, really detailed with the draft, and it's going to change, right? Depending on how the offseason goes. You're going to have the combine coming up, looking at different guys. And the nice thing is a lot of these are live, so there's going to be a lot of interaction. But we're going to kick one off today. It's going to be a little quicker one, a little more condensed, but still a 7-rounder. So Bryce, why don't we get right into it?
Yeah, I will bring that up right now on the screen so everyone can see it.
And guys, keep flooding the comments in. We are going to get to a little bit of Q&A here at the near the end of the show. So keep flooding them in, and we're going to pull some up.
And so, like Ryan said, I set the speed to turbo for all the other draft picks, so it should go quick. 7 rounds. We're using Pro Football Focus. As we go through this on Mock Draft Mondays, we will use different simulators throughout. They all kind of give their own little vibe to it. So we'll go through this one. We'll see how it kind of all pans out. And so right off the top of this, we'll quickly go through it. Cam Ward, as we expect. I don't know if Shedeur Sanders is going to Cleveland. Travis Hunter to the Giants. Mason Graham goes to the Raiders. Will Campbell. Mike Green has been climbing this board. And again, he's going to be a thorn in our side in this version. Goes to the Niners. So we come down here, and Tyler Warren never seems to get by the Bengals. So we're on the clock here with Seattle. I'm going to go on the theory that we've addressed some of the O-line concerns in the offseason. Like, that's how I'm going to take this draft this time. I think that's a fair way to look at it. Like we've talked about Mookie and Ryan on this. So let's go look at the D-line. And in particular, let's look at this edge group along with the interior. So Walter Nolan's still here, Mikael Williams, Shamar Stewart, Kenneth Grant. Those are kind of, especially in this part here, like I don't think Williams will be here at 18, even though I have him ranked here. Walter Nolan, Stewart, and Grant are the ones I'm kind of looking at. Who do you think, Mookie?
Yeah, Grant looks really good. And the only thing I would question is whether Seattle would be willing to spend consecutive first-round picks on the interior D-line,
Right.
Because this is a very deep defensive line draft that I think you can get a guy in the second or third or fourth round and still be productive, as opposed to like the year they took Cameron Young in what wasn't a super deep class, and he's probably on the roster bubble. Williams, it's weird how very infrequently Seattle ends up drafting any Georgia players.
Yes.
They got Kenny Mack and like Chris Durham way back when, but it's not plentiful as far as just any. David Green was famously a Hasselbeck backup attempt, and he literally never had an NFL snap. So it's not been deep on that front. Shamar Stewart, I know he kind of is a polarizing prospect right now because of like, does he have a wide variety of moves or whatever? But he certainly can win as a powerful athlete. I mean, Texas A&M has got some dudes up front. It's just a matter of how the hell did they not get more sacks?
Yeah.
I feel like edge rusher could be a bigger need than we think, especially when you think long-term about Mafe. Mafe's been very good, but I think you need a great edge rusher. And then Derek Hall, he could end up having a higher ceiling than Mafe, which I didn't think was possible after year one. But after that, we got to consider what they do with Nwosu, and we know we assume Draymond is probably not coming back. So with apologies to all the Jamie Sheriff fans out there, probably need another edge rusher, especially with the anticipation that you might not be keeping both Mafe and Hall down the line. So I can see Seattle being enamored enough with one of Williams or Shamar Stewart, but I think that they're going to go I would go with Williams, actually. I mean, just the Georgia players are too beastly. The hit rate is bigger than the bust rates.
Okay. I'm good with
like
that.
it. I like it.
All right. So we look back here. Okay. So now we're in the second round. We're not going to do any trades in this one, guys. We're going to just straightly go through what Seattle's got as their options in the draft. So here we come back. Now let's take a look at our O tackles and our interior O-line. So my favorite one that I would love Seattle to take is Donovan Jackson. I think his versatility, he's proven he can play left tackle in a pinch. I think he's the best one here. I like Ezra as well, but he's truly going to be a tackle, I think, at the next level. I think he's going to be a right tackle for somebody. I don't know if they'll kick him inside. The other interesting one here is Savanaya from Arizona. I think he's going to be a guard at the NFL level. He won't be a tackle. You saw him at Senior Bowl. He looked out of place in a lot of situations where they put him out there, and he struggled with speed. Who do you think here, Mookie, in this area, if we're going to address the interior O-line?
I would say, I mean, this is tackles and interior guards.
Yeah.
So like Cameron Williams, the way he looked throughout the college football play, and especially that Ohio State game, like he better be a guard or something, because as an NFL level tackle, he might get his ass whooped a lot. Whereas Jackson, he looked so impressive filling in. Was it Josh Simmons who was the one who got hurt? And then Jackson had to move. So he can play tackle and guard. I mentioned it before, but the possibility that you could move on from Cross, you opt not to give him his fifth year, you opt to move on because this is just how Seattle's O-line operates under Schneider. That gives you that versatility. So Donovan Jackson's been one of my draft crushes, and I think that's. I don't know if he's going to be available on the second, but we also have to keep in mind it's mid-February. We don't know the free agent moves, and also the combine hasn't happened yet. So there's going to be some fluctuation that will affect all these, and the mock drafts will get hopefully more accurate as we go along. And who was it that said? Was it Jim Nagy or somebody? There are only like 12 or 13 players with at the moment have first round draft grades. So some guys that you think, why are they at pick 20? Well, they might not have a first round draft grade, but it's just they're there. It gets the gap between pick 15 and pick 50 is just not so unbelievably wide. So I think I would take Jackson, and he could be that option at left guard.
Yeah, no, I like Jackson because it also hedges on one of your tackle spots. And a situation like, say, if they decide they're not going to sign Cross, we can go with Donovan Jackson. All right, so there we go. We've made our selection. Third round. All right, so we can either do one of two things. We can look at skill position, because I think receiver, I think tight end, and I think corner or safety are potentially going to be needs for Seattle, as well as linebacker. What are your thoughts, Mookie, on where we should go with this pick? I'm not ready to take a quarterback just yet.
I would honestly look at, for me, and I would look at cornerback as maybe a sneaky need.
I'm going to say, first of all, Warrior still being there in the third round is insane. I don't think that's going to hold up. You got the other Kobe Bryant. Selfishly, it would be cool to have Kobe Bryant on the team. Sign Byron Murphy Jr. in free agency. So you can really have the duplicitous defense. You got 2 Byron Murphys. You've got 2 Kobe Bryants. And in fact, the 2 Kobe's are both in the secondary. So that would be fun as hell. I think corner is a need, but I don't think it's really a third round need. So I think we could look at the skill position players. Personally, if Will Howard was there at 82, I would take Will Howard.
Right.
But I don't know if he's there.
He is.
Yeah. So you could probably chance it into the 4th round. Yeah, that's kind of tough.
Yeah.
So their quarterback rankings here in PFF, I think, need a bit of adjustment. Like Dart's below Leonard.
He'll go.
Kyle McCord's below Ewers. I think Kyle McCord's above. And the other one that I really have started to dive into more is Tyler Shuck out of Louisville. I think he's going to jump draft boards and be a 3rd or 4th round guy. Some people think he might even make day 2. I think Tyler Shuck could be an interesting one. So for me, I'm willing to wait just based on how this quarterback situation is set up. If we can get Tyler Shuck in the 4th, I think that's fine. And I think he could actually be a good NFL starter. What do we think about tight end?
I really like Mason Taylor. Not just because his dad was great, but also he looks like a really standout type. This is a deep tight end class. Yes. I mean, Mitchell Evans also looks good. So we're on the assumption that Farrell Brown, see you later, and Noah Fant, cap casualty. That leaves you with Barner and Brady Russell. Yeah, and he's kind of like this, and Tyler Mabry, who is oscillating between practice squad player and active roster player, in perpetuity. So Arroyo and Taylor would be my top 2. I don't know about Fannin. He's an interesting.
He's more of an H-back, it sounds like a lot of people are thinking now with him at this level. So I'm prepared to go with Mason Taylor here at pick 82.
Yeah, absolutely. I would take Mason there.
All right, so we've gone through that. Now we're going to get into the 4th round here. So let's take a look at our quarterback room. So there you go. Dart, McCord, Ewers are still there. Tyler Shuck. I'm good addressing another need before we get to quarterback. I think this is an opportunity for Seattle. Or do we take a quarterback here, Mookie? What are you feeling?
I think this might be the round where they take a quarterback. What are we seeing at wide receiver? Because I feel like they're going to keep DK and extend him. But if they move on from Lockett, that's going to be one where you got to go get another receiver and not rely on Bobo. And I don't think they're going to be aggressive in free agency signing receivers, which is what I'm getting at. But
so I'm going to bring one up here.
Yeah.
From Old School Seahawk. He goes, what's at DT? We have not addressed the D tackle position. And like we talked about with that first pick, Mookie, there's depth there. So receiver, I'm okay waiting till Ricky White's here from UNLV. Jimmy Horn Jr. There's
love
some other
Johnson.
guys in here that we, Lacey. There's
Got a
guys in
feeling
here that
Kevin
we
Lacey
can.
will not be factoring into any NFL roster anytime soon. But
That's true. But there's guys that we can look at potentially, later on in this. Kyle Williams is still sitting here.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at that D tackle room.
Yeah. And also Keandre Lambert-Smith, Cam Chancellor's cousin, I think, or nephew. So, I mean, you got the familial ties too. You got Barrow, you got Shamar Turner. So you got that A&M. You could still get an A&M guy, essentially.
Yep.
You end up not getting Shamar Stewart. You could go with Turner, have somebody within that monstrous defensive line of Texas A&M. Caldwell of Oregon was pretty good. Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty deep, like Howard Cross is probably going to be a late day 3 pick.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see them adding a couple of guys in the draft. Zeke Biggers from Georgia Tech. We might actually have something brewing with Zeke that I'll explain like after the show as far as whether or not he could be a prospect for the Seahawks. But I think they might go with Shamar Turner could be something. It's just the size. Can they have like a real big body?
Yeah.
Just a space eater who's going to be cheaper and around. So he's touching 300. I'm wondering if they can get somebody who's like well north of 300.
So he's 300, and then let's look at Caldwell here. Caldwell is 340.
Yeah. He's 6'1", so not the tallest guy in the world, but 340. Yeah, and he would probably be somebody at the time, right now, be projected for like the 5th or 6th round. But again, it's a February mock draft. Nobody's
we don't know if free agency's done yet or anything.
Round guy, this late 5th round guy in the 4th round in February. And how big is Barrow? Yeah, Simeon Barrow Jr.
290.
That's not going to cut it. So, and a redshirt senior. So I'm not too familiar with Tafuna, but Tim Smith, again, Alabama wasn't their absolute best season defensive.
Zeke Biggers is interesting, 6'6", 320.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And Georgia Tech was a pleasant surprise this year. I'm fine with really any of Biggers, or if you go back to the defensive line room, the Texas A&M dude. So
Shamar Turner.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this. Let's go, considering how we've said there's so much depth here, let's go with a receiver.
Yeah.
And I like Kyle Williams because he's still sitting here.
Mm-hmm.
I think he adds something to the offense. He'll be able to, fill a little bit of what Lockett did, but also give us a little bit more. So
yeah,
I say we take Kyle Williams here and then address potentially, quarterback or D lineman in the next round.
Yeah. And so you got Kyle Williams, and of course, Nick Nash in that San Jose State, Washington State game. They couldn't stop him. I mean, Nash was putting up tons of numbers. He was one of the top receivers in the country that you didn't really hear about because it's San Jose State.
Okay, so let's look at our QBs. Quinn Ewers, Kyle McCord. Tyler Shuck's the guy I like. Like, I like McCord a lot, but those two right now are the two guys I'm looking at and eyeing as a Seahawk.
Yeah, the one thing with Shuck is that he's going to be 26, like by the time the season starts. So I was like, he better be ready, NFL ready by his second season. So
agreed.
Yeah, so he's going to be like a late day 2. Brosmer is also not too bad out of Minnesota.
Yep.
So
do we take Kyle McCord here then at pick 172?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind McCord at all. I mean, I think he's shown improvements. It's just that's, it is kind of like this big 1-year bump.
Yeah,
in a weak conference. But once you get to this part of the draft, it's kind of more like we're taking a flyer on a quarterback, but not like a total flyer in the sense that it's somebody who's borderline undrafted.
Okay, so we'll take our quarterback and Kyle McCord. And now let's go take a look at our interior D-line again. So we can get Zeke Biggers here, which I think fits.
Yeah. It's basically him or Caldwell that deep into the draft.
Tonka so we'll Biggers. I like Biggers because he's got the height. Now the question will be is how much is that a leverage issue against D linemen?
Yeah, absolutely. Tonka Hemingway has got an A+ name and should be a first-round pick just off of the name value.
Well, if that's the case, should Nazir Stackhouse for an interior D lineman. Yeah, it's a great name.
Joey Slackman. I don't really want anybody slacking off.
Yeah. You got Thor Griffith. You've got, Nash Hutmatcher.
Yeah.
Like, there's some great D lineman names in here. But let's go, based on what I just said about Beakers, I'm more comfortable going with Caldwell just because he won't get out leveraged. I don't think it's 6'1" necessarily as much as 6'6". Are we okay with that, or do we want to go somewhere else?
I think we could go with Caldwell there. We
Okay.
are. They don't go with too many like non-Huskies. We've had a couple of Oregon picks, but with mixed success.
All right, so let's take a look at interior O-line again. Miles Frazier's still there.
Mm.
So if
Yeah,
we wanted to, and so is Fairchild. So if we wanted to double dip back into that interior O-line, that is an option here.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by Dylan Fairchild. I can't remember if his season was cut short due to injury. But whatever the case, he was definitely highly regarded. But I would probably take Frazier. I mean, LSU's offense was not the main problem for them.
No PTSD, Mookie, of Anthony Bradford.
What's the worst that could happen? I mean, they took Posick and they just forgot to make him a center year one, and then he got injured too much. But I mean, Damian Lewis worked out, so might as well just dip into the LSU offensive line again.
All right, there we go. So we took another guard here. Now we're down to our last pick in the 7th round. Let's take a look at corner, because Ryan did address that.
Yeah.
I'm interested by Muhammad out of Oregon.
Yeah, I don't know if they double dip it at Oregon, but again, this is a February mock draft. This is all exercise. But I from what I remember of Jabbar Muhammad at UW, he felt like one of those Seahawky type of cornerbacks.
Yes.
And then he transferred out. But obviously there's somebody else we didn't mention. What's the guy's name? Frazier from UTSA. He's another Woolen type, but not as fast. And he's got some of the same technique issues, and almost no chance he would get drafted that late. But at safety, these are kind of like the Kayvon Wallace, Rayshawn Jenkins replacements. Shiloh is not getting drafted unless there is some sort of charity thing going on. Like you don't have to do it. It's like just because he's got the famous last name.
No kidding.
So Jordan Hancock was pretty good, but I don't know if he's like super athletic enough to be.
Dan Jackson was doing some nice things from when I was talking with Dan Viens down at Senior Bowl, but I think he's a UDFA that you can pick up if you want to. Very much like Ty Okada, who we've already got here in Seattle. So I'm either looking at Muhammad, or I wanted to look at the running back room and see. So Donovan Edwards is still there.
I prefer Rocket Sanders to Donovan Edwards. But the big difference is Donovan Edwards and the familiarity with Mike McDonald.
Right.
But I feel like Edwards could end up just being a UDFA. He's just not especially dynamic in the open field. If they were to take a running back, I think they'd take that Martinez guy from Miami, like a hard-nosed physical runner who can cut back in zone schemes. But if we go with the defense, I think they would take a cornerback.
I think so too. So let's go to corner. Yeah. And let's take Muhammad here, because I think he fits. He can also play that nickel spot too, which I think then frees up Witherspoon again to be, potentially moved around even more in the defense.
Yep.
So we'll take Muhammad, and that wraps up our first mock draft Monday. And I guarantee you our grade's going to be horrible because we didn't do what PFF wanted. But
not that bad.
We got a B.
Yeah.
We didn't. The only one they didn't like was Caldwell, really, or Kyle Williams. But our Williams and McCord pick and Frazier pick got us A's. So
overall, it's all big schools, really, which wouldn't be totally unrealistic. But because every once in a while you get a Lenoir Ryan in there, like with Derek Young. But still, we're not cosplaying as if John Schneider were to think it this exact way. But it is just one of the paths that the Seahawks would take. Address your edges, address the trenches. You got an edge rusher, you got a tackle / guard. You're still semi-addressing the trenches by tapping Mason Taylor in there, because he's going to be doing some inline work, in addition to the fact that he could split out wide. You have a skill position guy in Kyle Williams. We got to beware of the 4th-round wide receiver history with the Seahawks.
Yeah, no kidding.
McCord would be that one, developmental quarterback who knows if Howell's going to stay, if McCord's going to compete with Howell, whatever. And then you got an interior lineman, you got another interior lineman, and then Muhammad kind of like wraps things up as your cornerback option. So linebacker is going to be interesting, because if they don't re-sign Ernest Jones, it's going to be a very different mock draft Monday we do a month from now.
Oh, don't say that.
Oh yeah,
don't say that. That's got it. That to me has to be like the Leonard Williams. Like, it's like, you look back and like, hey, John did his job, but it was almost like you knew it was going to happen, or you knew it should. So let's hope the same thing happens. It's like, first priority day one, Leonard signed.
Yeah,
We
and
don't have to
same
think about it.
thing with Aaron's, because if you don't do that, guess what? You got Tyrus Knight and Patrick O'Connell.
Yeah,
as your
you're
starting
starting. You're
lineup.
almost start. Yeah, it's almost like you're starting over again, right? So,
So-
yeah, and that's the last thing Mike wants to do. Especially in his defense. So, guys, real quick, Bryce? Let's get into a few Q&As. Pull one up here. One of the first ones. I think he's talking about Clint. Is he talking about Clint Kubiak? He must be talking about Clint Kubiak.
Yeah, you do.
You know what?
Like
Honestly, dude, I watched the presser. Looks like the guy's hitting the gym, right? He's not honestly, dude, he's not a bad looking guy. So I'm gonna take that as a compliment. But
there you
answer is we're not related. That means Gary would probably be like my uncle or something, and that would be kind of cool because then I'd have a lot of NFL ties, right? But
yeah, you say, can I borrow one of your Super Bowl rings, please?
yeah,
Or
or just
to show
get
the
me on
felt.
the staff doing something, So yeah, no, we're not related. Yeah. So what Hawks fan Matt Man brought one up here. That stretch between free agency and the draft is brutal. So this will be awesome. Yeah, it is. It is. It is a bit of a stretch, right? So,
Especially when it's us, because it's not like they ever do anything interesting on day one to begin.
Yeah, no kidding.
So you're talking
Remember how
about,
all excited we got when Draymond Jones was signed, like in the first wave or two, and we all thought it was this big deal, and then obviously we've kind of seen what's.
and that's the other thing. You hope he's not gun shy again because of stuff like that again.
that might be
Well,
one
I
of those
tried that
examples of burning money in free agency, and it's not, and it ended up not really working out. So
I think, like I go back to I think that would be the one position though where he, like Bryce mentioned earlier, he's got to feel like he's sizzling a little bit on that hot seat. And so if you just throw money, and I think we all agree, like we all know that doesn't just magically form a great offensive line. It's hard, right? It's a unit. Coaching plays a huge role, but at least it's like, hey, I tried it this way, So, and if he has to face when he has to face ownership, because he did the same thing and they had another mediocre season, now at least he can go and say, guys, I did this. This is, I spent money on the O-line in free agency. I did what needed to be done, and it's out of my hands, opposed to the other way around. Like, John, you're doing the same thing again. We have to go in a different direction. So that's why I think that's the one position I do think that now I would be surprised if they don't get somebody in free agency that's like not, the bargain basement onion, right? So, Bryce, you got a couple more here?
Yeah, we do. So let me jump in here. We've also got Throwhouse, who's thinking we are going Membu. I don't always agree with Yates and Kuiper, but Pierce Jr. was there too. So in our draft, I think Membu is definitely an interesting and intriguing player for Seattle because he's going to probably move inside to guard at the next level here in the NFL. But again, like we've talked about, if there is a impact defensive player, I would keep feeding that side and go with a O lineman in 2 and 3, potentially, if and get like a Donovan Jackson or someone that falls maybe into that area. And let John Benton also try and develop Christian Haynes and, Sundell and Lamea and Mike Jarrell. We just drafted 3 guys last year. We got to also see what they're like. Was Scott Huff really a bigger part of that problem in that development period? We've had guys that we've drafted go off to other teams and all of a sudden have success because our developmental process here was bad. Now we've got an established NFL offensive line coach who's had success developing later round pick guys into good players. Let's see what he can do with some of the guys that we took last year and see if he can develop them. So
yeah, agree.
That's definitely an interesting one for sure.
Just really quickly touch on that too. That's what people got to realize when you kind of go into these drafts, thinking about the year before. We how much did we talk about Derek Hall the year prior? There's people are you forgot about, people forgot about Derek Hall. Well, he didn't work out. It's like, well, wait a second. Now we have Mike McDonald coming in here, some new coaching, see if they can get more out of Derek Hall. Plus, it's just being in the league another year, right? So, like you said, we drafted quite a few guys last year, developmental guys. So, I'm excited about the new coaching too to see what they can do there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just a couple things here. So, a couple members already. So, Dogzilla became a member. Ian Victor became a member. Old School Seahawk became a member. Hawks fan Matt became a member to our page, as well did Amy Holmes, and as well, Old School Seahawk gifted one of the memberships to someone. So that's another thing, guys. You can do that. You can gift memberships to fellow people that are in the chat regularly. So if you want to contribute that way, that's a huge thing. And then if you get one of those free membership guys, make sure to pass that along as well. And after you've had your free membership run out, join the channel and become part of this community here. So Dogzilla's got another one here. We already tried the development route with these guys. Sign someone good to help improve the O-line. Totally agree. You need to sign a impact level offensive lineman in free agency, but we can't just ignore the development. Part of that is why the Eagles have been so successful, is they do get guys that are impact players in free agency, but they also develop the Jason Kelsey's, the Landon Dickersons, the Cam Jurgens, these guys that they have drafted throughout, they do develop them, right? So that's going to be a big part of this now, is how does John Benton, Rick Dennison, when he eventually signs what I think will be his deal, what is their role in how we develop these guys? How are they going to also change how scouts look at offensive linemen? That's going to be the other key thing. When John's making the evaluation point, John Benton's probably going to have a say in, hey, this is how we need to look at what offensive lineman we're getting out of college.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Do both. You can still develop guys, but as like succession plans for shorter term solutions. But I would rather they sign somebody good, or at least somebody with the potential to be very good now, but still keep on looking through the draft and keep on developing some of the guys you have right now, because there is some talent. We've seen some promise from Lomea and Oluwatimi, and Haynes at times, and even Michael Jarrell. I mean, like Jarrell could probably justify Forsyth's exit. So I think that there are some guys you want to keep around, just at least through training camp, and see if they can make a leap under new coaching.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
So here's one more.
Lockett.
Ryan Myers, is Lockett gone? Based on how Mike McDonald addressed it, I would say there's a good chance this is going to be some nice way of moving Tyler Lockett on. He didn't really talk with him with the same vigor he did about other players, even guys that, didn't really have an impact last year. It was kind of like, this is something we're working through. And whenever I've noticed with Mike McDonald, when he uses that term, it generally does not bode well for the direction that most fans want it to go. It's kind of like Pete Carroll's old legit tag when someone was injured. Him saying this is something we're working through and just having a monotone voice to it. Usually, he kind of used those terms with when they were looking at Jerome Baker and that, like, oh, is Baker? Yeah, it's something we're working through. Well, that's definitely not a good sign for Tyler, I don't think. I think it's going to be, Tyler, here you can retire, or Tyler, we're going to release you and you can go where you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's tough, but sometimes in the football world, which is still a business world, there are some tough decisions you have to make in a salary cap league. If this was baseball and there was no cap, then cool. Let's have Tyler on here forever. I'm not going to worry about the pockets of ownership, but we do have a cap, and Seattle's got to get cap compliant pretty soon. And it feels like unless there's some huge restructure of Lockett's deal, it's probably time to move on. And it's just as tough to move on from Lockett as it was tough to deal Bennett, cut Sherm, have to medically retire Cam and medically retire Carson. But he's given us some incredible years. He's one of the greatest Seahawks players and just human beings out there to have ever played for Seattle. So it's eventually there comes a time where you got to move on and look for that successor to his role. But I'm sure he will stick around and maybe sell some really good real estate to some of you who live in the Seattle area.
Very true.
Yeah, no, wouldn't that be awesome? Tyler, your realtor. And then another new member popping up. Neil, appreciate it, man. And guys, throughout there's going to be membership announcements as well. So it won't be like, you just sign up and you're in the dark. There'll be announcements throughout and letting you know some of the perks that are happening and all that kind of stuff. So, just stay tuned, stay with it. It's going to be exciting. We're looking forward to it as well. So, Neil, appreciate it. Sweet bike, Neil. Mookie Alexander. Yeah, Neil.
That is a good looking bike. Neil.
Everyone's noticing your thumbnail there, and That's a great looking bike. Love to see the channel growing. Thanks, guys. Neil responded there. So yeah, Neil, appreciate it. We've seen him on the channel a few times. So that's awesome stuff, man. This has been we got any more here?
I don't think so.
Wrap things up.
We'll wrap things up here.
Yeah, let's wrap things up. I was just reading. I was laughing at one because I'm not going to post it, but it's funny. Just one of our old friends there. So, but hey, guys, this has been awesome. Like I said, guys, at the beginning of the show, we made the announcement for anyone that did miss it that now we are going to be a part of Field Gulls, and you're going to see regular videos, regular content on there from the Hawkszone. And we're super honored to be a part of that. We're looking forward to get things going there, and also the membership programs, guys. That's all going to be on the page, so you guys can click the link, look into that, and it gives you all the details as well. And yeah, so guys, appreciate the support. Hit the sub button if you haven't yet, and that's going to be it for us. Bryce, Mookie, any closing thoughts here?
No, other than, again, great to have you on board as part of the Field Gulls team, and for everybody in the live stream. Hopefully, you can also be a convert to having a Field Gulls account. It's free. Some of you are Field Gulls members anyway, so nothing really changes other than the podcasts you see here are just going to have accompanying articles on Field Gulls. So it means you could skip a step sometimes. And I'm sure we're going to do some other fun stuff. We've done a couple of Field Gulls mailbags and incorporated it into the Hawkszone Rundown, but it's going to be really fleshed out as the offseason gets a little busier. As far as what we got going at Field Gulls this week, we should have an interview coming up soon with Jaw Joyner, an edge rusher from Minnesota, and Alexander Castro is going to be doing that. And we might also have something going on with a couple other prospects, draft prospects, and a little bit of preview stuff as far as the NFL Combine. The Underwear Olympics are coming next week back in Indianapolis. So we'll have coverage of that. We won't be on site, but we might be on site for the NFL draft. We'll see how that goes in a couple of months. It's just why they put it in Green Bay, man. Like Green Bay and Milwaukee is not 5 minutes apart.
No, it's not exactly the easiest place to get to either, is it, Mookie?
Yeah, and bring the draft out here instead.
Oh man, yeah, wouldn't that be cool? Yeah, I mean, Detroit was rocking last year, right? What's the weather like in Green Bay that time of year? I guess, I mean, it starts warming up a little bit in
I'm sure it better be warm in late April, but
you never know.
What kind of experience is that? I don't want to go to Lambeau Field to watch the draft. I want to go to watch a game.
Watch a game, exactly. Because what else are you gonna do, right? Walk around the neighborhood, but it's one of those historic places. I think they could just. Yeah, I think they could just say, like, we're coming to you live from, historic Green Bay, and it's more for the television audience. But I agree with you, man. That's one I would probably skip and save that for a game. So, yeah, guys, awesome stuff tonight. We got some cool stuff coming up in the week, as always. So hit the bell so you're notified when we're going live. Sub to the channel, and that's it for us tonight. Go Hawks!
Go Hawks!
Go Hawks!